Welcome to Measuring Success Right, the official podcast of the Marriott Student Review, a podcast for students by students, where we connect the leaders of tomorrow with the issues of today.
If you want to be somebody who can connect more with just their own people, but with everybody, it's really important to be able to admit when you're wrong.
Picture this. You're driving your car on the freeway, jamming out to some J. Cole, and you realize your exit is a few feet ahead. If you miss it, Google Maps says it will add 10 minutes to your route destination. You're already running a few minutes behind, and adding even just 2 minutes to your route means the late policy. You'll have to reschedule your dentist appointment, and you do not want that to happen. So you do what any reasonable person on a time budget would do. You turn your blinker on, quickly check over your shoulder because safety first, and jolt the driver's wheel to the right. As soon as you do, a car behind you beeps their horn for 5 long seconds, and you realize your blind spot. Luckily enough, your quick reaction helped you catch the exit just in time. You don't crash, thank goodness, although you've got an angry driver behind you, but at least you made it to your dentist appointment. To end the scenario on a positive note, because catching the exit and making your appointment is not enough, you take a serious moment of reflection, the blind spot. You turned your blinker on, you checked over your shoulder, you saw a clear lane next to yours, and you were sure of it, but almost crashing means you clearly missed something. At that moment, you commit to double check, if not triple check yourself, next time to make sure you catch your blind spots. There are different types of blind spots. Driving blind spots, like the scenario in the beginning, leadership blind spots, and even social blind spots. It's important for us to double check, if not triple check ourselves, so we can catch them. Evelyn Harper and Kofi Aidoo, 2 advertising students at Brigham Young University, co-created Project Blindspot as a way to help, quote, become aware of the cultural and racial tensions on campus. You'll find that exact phrase when you visit checkyourblindspot.org. In these 4 months since the project's release in end of February, it's caught lots of attention, especially throughout the Black Lives Matter movement. At MSR, we believe that Black Lives Matter, and today we want to bring you the opportunity to hear from Kofi and Evelyn about their experience working on Project Blindspot and their views on success. So, Evelyn, Kofi, welcome to Measuring Success Right today.
Thanks for having us.
I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you, guys. Now, Kofi, you're from Modesto, California. Evelyn, you're from Indianapolis, Indiana. That's where you guys were at right before coming to Provo, Utah, Brigham Young University. It's a different dynamic around Brigham Young University. You don't see a lot of people of color. And I want to know your journey of how you got from your hometown to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. Evelyn, maybe if we could start with you.
Well, my parents believe that we should not waste our money on education that costs too much. So when they heard about Brigham Young University, they thought, perfect. Both my parents had full rides on a special Negro scholarship back in the day. So they were like, we want that for our children. All my siblings have gone here, except for one. And I think the biggest thing was just getting a cheaper education. So
well, there you go. Kofi, how about you?
My experience, I guess, in my community was that BYU was seen as kind of like the Harvard, at least, amongst the Mormon community. So if you went to BYU, you're destined for success. So I really wanted to get accepted here, but then actually attending the school I was a little more hesitant. And also with Evelyn, my parents were also happy about the tuition.
I think it's so interesting that you say it's the Harvard of the Mormon, right? Mormon church or whatever, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's so interesting. I definitely want to know if you guys could even just share an experience that you had of the first time that you noticed unconscious bias towards you as a person of color at BYU. When I came to BYU, also similar stories, knowing that it was cheap school to come to, and different story as lots of background there with my family as to how I ended up here. But when I remember I first set foot at BYU, and I was really surprised by the dynamic. I thought it was going to be really different. And what I mean by different is I just thought there was going to be more community for Latino people. And I noticed there were a lot of Caucasians, a lot of white people. And I've noticed that, which we will talk about later on in the podcast, with Project Blindspot, you talk about how, BYU, maybe the community around BYU sometimes doesn't fully grasp the experience of the Black student at BYU, right? Tell me about that first experience, that first moment when you noticed unconscious bias towards you at BYU.
Wow. Honestly, probably my first day. Just like when you move in, like the freshman dorms, they usually have like a get to know you activity. And at that get to know you activity, of course I met some like great people. I also I remember like someone was like, "Oh my gosh, you're Black. We need a Black friend in our group. Will you please join us?" So,
wow.
That was pretty quick. That was like, I don't know, 2 hours in after moving in my stuff and saying goodbye to my parents. I mean, yeah, it's pretty immediate.
Kofi, how about you?
Yeah, I guess I started noticing pretty early on as well. I don't know if it was as immediate as the first day, but I remember a lot of like the get to know you type questions revolved around sports and athletics, and I feel like a lot of people just wanted to jump to the conclusion that I was on some type of sports team, and when you're not that type of you don't fit that narrative, there's
right.
most oh, no, I didn't mean it like that kind of thing, because then they want to backtrack, no, it's not just because you're Black, I'm not racist, and it's just kind of awkward, I'm like, no, I'm here academically, even though I don't really know what I want to do yet, but
yeah.
Really shattering people's expectations, I feel like was kind of awkward early on. Still today, still trying to navigate that question. So
yeah.
When people stop thinking I was an athlete, when I gained weight, no one asked me after that. I was like, well, there you go. That's your answer.
And the funny thing is just how you said it's awkward. Right? And you don't know what to do in those moments. Sometimes you just don't even know what to say. And it's weird because even if the question comes up repetitively, it's always awkward. And you say, Kofi, that you're still trying to figure out how to navigate those spaces. And I want to know how, if, your race and the fact that you're a person of color, did that influence what you decided to choose to study? I know Kofi and Evelyn, I've stalked you a little bit, which is kind of what we do for this podcast. Something that really stood out to me, Kofi, from your LinkedIn bio. And I'll read part of that. You mentioned that you basically grew up, your ethnicity and your faith really influenced your life, your character, how you've grown up, the person you are today. You said you've been exposed to a variety of different social circles. And at moments, you said that you felt that you never really belonged anywhere, that you never completely identified with one specific group, which later you found out that was I guess, a benefit, that was a tool in your toolbox, because that was a way where you could talk to a perspective of people, lots of different perspectives, different cultures, different races, and that disparity of your upbringing has given you the ability to connect with all those different people, right? And you're grateful for that. You say that you want to implement that in your point of view in the world through strategy. So I want to know, if there's, Kofi specifically, what did you notice about your upbringing that influenced choosing advertising and being an advertising student at Brigham Young University?
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to read it. I guess I've been really introspective in the past year as I've kind of decided what I really want to go all in on, because a career is something I want to be passionate about. And through advertising strategy, I found that I could be, influential in, what types of marketing messages come out, and be able to kind of share these perspectives that kind of go untold in America and throughout the world. But I guess going back, I noticed these kind of this lone wolf type lifestyle I've lived, just because I'm Ghanaian American, so both my parents were born in Ghana, but I was born in Modesto, California. And going home from school, I was with these immigrants, so I couldn't completely connect, even with my parents in a way, because I wasn't fluent in the language. I wasn't obsessed with the food. But then I go back out to school, and I don't look like anyone else at church. On the soccer team, I'm the only black kid. So there's almost like a disconnect there. And then if you want to implement that too, even church, the Mormon church is predominantly white, and I feel like that almost created a disconnect with me even within my quorums growing up. And then I'd go to my black barbershops, and somehow religion always comes up. And there's almost like a disconnect when I say I'm Mormon, and then they want me to tell, what do you guys believe? Like, I'm educating kind of like both sides of the coin. So I don't really fit in almost anywhere, but it allows me to kind of help people be educated on the other side, and I get to hear like the other side's perspective.
That is so powerful. Yeah, that's really powerful, because I feel that because you can, even if it's not to a full extent, because you can connect with both sides of the coin, the way I see that is you are a bridge, right? You connect two people. You connect people. And I think that is what we need, because there's misconceptions about both sides, right? People have different biases, different ideas of what the other side of the coin looks like or acts like, or cultures, customs. And when you have somebody that can in some way connect with you and have that experience to share and tell you what it's really like on that other side of the coin, that's what we need to get rid of those biases, right? To have people connect with each other. So that's really powerful. Thank you. Evelyn, tell me about, I guess, your journey of how that has affected you and why you decided to join advertising.
I think it kind of came down to more my personality. Just in high school, well, my parents are engineers. That's how they met, and that's my dad is still like practicing engineer. And so my parents were like, I'm the youngest, she's so bright. I did all this math and science. And it wasn't that I wasn't good at it, but it was that one day I was in high school, I had this realization, oh my gosh, my parents want me to do this for the rest of my life. And this is boring. I'm so bored. I do not like this. And then after that, it wasn't hard to be like, I gotta change. And then advertising seemed like the one thing that didn't seem boring, or too meta. I went to an art high school, or I guess I want to call it that because that's what anyone really actually cared about. And it was just like opened my eyes to the world of the arts, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not that either. And I wanted something that was kind of like in between, that was like a little bit more methodical. People call us sellouts, but I would call it methodical. But still, it was like I really get to be creative. So that's how I ended up. And I realized advertising isn't very common in a major, and so no schools that were around me really offered that would also offer me, like, I would be able to financially afford it. So
right. Thank you for sharing that. You're both clearly using what you're learning in your major to, I would honestly be able to say, make a difference, because when your Project Blindspot first released end of February, beginning of March, the voice was spreading. Every class I went to, everybody was talking about it. And even all the professors, I got really close to one of my professors. She was helping me with some side projects, and she was also just mentioning how this project, she's like, have you heard of Project Blindspot? You have got to go take a look at this. And at that moment, back to in February during Black History Month, which is also why you released it in February to commemorate, Black History Month. is also at that very moment when we experienced the racial comments in the Black Immigrant History panel that was taken hold here at BYU. So that was just such a big, it made a big ripples, the fact that it released around that time too. A lot of people were using that to inform themselves, to check their blind spots, to, I guess, come to that realization that, oh my gosh, maybe I do have to take a triple check and realize what I'm biased against, right? Maybe it's just like those little misconceptions of like just the staring. You have videos and pictures, especially videos of the eyes moving across the screen, right? That's your unconscious bias, is one of the things you say on your Project Blindspot. And maybe that's something that a lot of people just don't even know, right? It's unconscious. Before we really dive into the content behind Project Blindspot, I want to know how this project came to your minds. So I know from doing my research, it was you two that were kind of co-creating this project, and along with about 40 other people that were part of this project. And I know that Harper, or Evelyn, you talked to, or I guess it was a friend of yours, also from advertising, right? That kind of asked you a question, and that's kind of where the creativity came and spurred up. So tell me about that. What did that conversation look like?
So our really good friend, Harrison Brownell, he was taking he's like a psych minor, and he was taking a class on I don't remember. I don't want to misname the class, but some psychology class. And he had they had brought in a bunch of people of marginalized perspectives just to talk about their experiences. I think it was just in the United States. And they were talking about how those experiences are also happening at BYU. And so he asked me, we were walking through the library for something, and he asked me, hey, I had this happen in class. What do you think you go through at BYU that people don't understand? And it was we talked for a while, and he's like, wow, just listening to this experience really enlightened me. I feel like I know a lot more. And then I was like, if I can do that with one person, maybe I can do that with a lot of people. I just wanted to make a message that really explained the Black perspective at BYU. Yeah. And then I kind of knew Kofi, we'd done some stuff together, but I feel like we didn't know each other as well. And I was like, man, I need another person who is Black. And
that understands,
I need to figure out if this is even a good idea. So we talked about it, and then that at least that's kind of how I barely remember that now, but I know that's where it all started.
And quick question, I got curious when you said, your friend made you that question, asked you that, and you realized when he said, wow, this has really helped me understand your experience better and helped me, change my perspective. Do you appreciate when people ask you questions like that?
I think it depends in the context. Some people do it to just show people that hey, I care. And then there's some people I can tell that they're genuine and they just want to listen. And so I think it's very situational. And by the way, Harrison helped us for a lot of the the strategy and the naming and all the meaning behind everything that we had. He helped with. He was pretty much a part of all of the meaning and all of the placement of the content. So he helped us also understand. Honestly, I never took time to understood what white people thought about Black people.
Interesting.
And that was a really interesting place to be, not only talking to other Black students, but also talking to a lot of white people. But anyways, going back to your question, I think it's situational. I don't know. What do you think, Kofi?
Yeah, I would say, there's a time and place for those types of conversations. It can get exhausting if people I feel like a lot of people, we have almost branded ourselves as, the experts in race, I feel like at this point.
Which we are not, by the
way. We are not at
there
all.
There are tons of people
right.
we recommend to talk to for facts.
That are professionals.
Love that.
List dates, facts, people. We can only do 1% of the knowledge that people know. And so, yeah.
We can only speak from our perspectives, and, it can get draining, constantly talking about some of these. But yeah, I think it really just depends on the situation and kind of like the relationship between the two people.
Definitely.
Also, when you can tell that they're only going to take your opinion, I think it's really important to listen to several different, especially, okay, in this circumstance, if you want to learn from Black people, don't just take my word for it. A lot of us have different and varying opinions and different things to say, and it's really disheartening because I think people use that almost against us. Like, oh, well, another Black person said this, so this invalidates, like, your community. And I think that, like, when people ask me questions, I'm like, oh, are they going to use this against another person who has another valid opinion and experience? And so, like, I thought about that recently just with, like, all the social media and seeing what people are saying. That's really concerning for people to do that.
Yeah. I really appreciate that you guys said that, because I see not only with, the community of people of color, but also with just any other, maybe just minorities, I guess, around BYU, right? Any other community that's not the majority, Caucasian or white. And a lot of people just assume, they just take one person's word for it, and they just assume that that person represents the whole community or the whole culture. And everybody has their personal experience, right? Maybe there's shared experiences within those people, groups of people, but at the same time, everybody comes from different backgrounds, right? It's so different. For example, even you, Kofi, you say your parents immigrated Ghana, they're from another country. You've got it's intersectionality right there, right? Whereas other people that may have been born, their parents in the United States, people of color, they've definitely also have a different experience. And so I thank you for saying that. I'm curious to know, because for our listener out there who may be thinking, okay, so I shouldn't do this with the intent to like just take their word for the entire, community of Black people. How do I even approach it, right? So give me an example of something, if maybe whether it be made up or somebody that actually said this to you, of a bad example of how to start a conversation like that.
Yeah, I remember one time in the Wilk, this one guy was just like I was just sitting with some of my like Black friends, BSU members, and he just kind of came up to us like, hey, why can't I say the N-word kind of thing? And I think he was like a friend of a friend of someone in the group, and he was like, I just want to get your opinion, like just kind of dropped, like it seemed like he was just walking by, and he just dropped in.
Man, he's bold.
Wow.
That always, I'm sorry, keep going, but he's very bold.
Blew my mind. I was like, so are we going to do this? Like right here, like you got time? Like right here, right now? And like, that's a classic, like what not to do. Yeah. But we did take the time. Everyone had time, I guess, that day to kind of go in, show some resources, a few articles, personal experiences, and it turned to like a 15-minute lunch turned into like a 90-minute like discussion. So I don't recommend doing that all the time, because most of the time it's just not tactful at all, and it doesn't really show, empathy. Just kind of dropping it like that.
That's a lot of pressure, too.
Yeah.
I bet.
It's a lot of pressure to be like, so I'm going to ask you a question so you can dismantle the entire system of institutional racism. And it's, your words, and you're going to make it or break it. I'm always like, why do people expect that, like, like I'm going to ask you a question to a person I don't really know. It's almost like setting us up for failure, because it's like no one's ever going to have the perfect thing to say. So it's like, for questions like that, it's almost like it seems like you already know. You just want to know. You want to see someone say it to you in person. And it's like, how, like, the N-word, for example. Like, what? People used it as a term. Let's go back to, like, I'm picking the fields. I am picking the fields. I am considered property. I do not matter. I'm considered just as something that's helping the economy of the United States. And people are saying the N-word to me to remind me of that. Do you think it's a good idea to say it now? No. And I'm like, and the thing is, I'm like, that part of history was not left out in the history book.
Right.
And so those type of conversations, I feel like if you already know the answer, you just want to hear it in person, that is very, very dangerous, especially in a place that's so homogenous like here. Like, can you imagine everyone not believing something until somebody says it? Which is why we made what we did, because it's like, if people know this is coming from, we tried to get as much research from as much Black people, but of course we couldn't show everyone's individual experience. But it's like, that for people was like wow. But I'm like, it's sometimes really hard to know that it takes that for people to understand something that is a fact.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm like over here like snapping like if we were at like a poetry slam. Love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Sometimes I can get on.
Add that in the audio.
Right?
Because I feel like I'm playing a role on something.
My snaps over here, if you can hear them. Thank you for sharing that, you guys. What you said at the end, Evelyn, that's why you made what you did, right? That's why you created Project Blindspot, to try to, even though you couldn't reach all people of color, include every single individual experience within that, you tried to share the Black student's perspective as well represented as you could. How did you guys find the right people to participate in this project? Because when I visit your website, I see pictures also within your pictures and your videos of people that are not of color. That, for example, one of my favorite pictures that you have on there is the picture of the arms, white shirts, and all you can see, no faces. All you see is like 4 or 5 different arms of different shades of skin, and they have different color band-aids on their arm. And that was just so powerful to me, to see that unconscious bias in a picture. And I wonder, okay, Harrison, for example, your friend that was, I guess, the inspiration behind the question, behind the idea that helped you along with the project. How did you find people that were willing to help you work on this project?
Yeah, the Ad Lab was very supportive in this project, and we could not thank the people that have helped us execute this enough. It created a lot of experiences for people to, have these conversations like on set, backstage, so that they can kind of like organically develop. And the open minds of the people in the Ad Lab, the students who were just barely accepted, were just willing to get their hands wet and woke enough to take on a heavy project like this. I don't know if I would have, if I was in their shoes, honestly. I don't know if I'd be too timid.
Yeah, because I realized, I was like, man, we're putting them in a very compromising position where you're literally like, you're either a model or you're like someone in the background that's being portrayed something that I know no one wants to be portrayed as, but it's very realistic. And I was like, man, these people are brave, because even like the one where it's really like you can see their faces. At this point we don't have names or anything, but the one where like the eyes are going back and forth on the screen, it's like, I was like, hey, there's this thing we're making to explain, like, just like simply showing the unconscious bias that when people walk by and someone looks different and you stare. And I'm like, but we're going to have to put your face. Are you okay with that?
Wow.
But yeah, the Ad Lab is definitely a special place, and that's where we found most of the people that did it.
Yeah, and even friends and friends of friends that came out when I put out like kind of like a casting call, just like on my Instagram.
All professional.
Yeah, just some random people came out on our shooting days, and
that's true.
It's just kind of like friends of people that want to be educated on these things. There is, I feel like, a population at BYU who are aware of their blind spots and do want to be better.
Definitely.
Just making that the majority is the goal.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think it's worth mentioning, like you said, that there are people that are trying to understand, right? And even I'm thinking about how when the whole, the racist remarks that were made in the panel in February, how President Worthen went to the perspectives and he went to share a message with the people that were there, and how BYU is doing what they can as faculty to help improve that environment around BYU. So I think that's, like you said, it's worth mentioning, right? That there are people out there that are doing what they can to be educated and to change that mindset. I want to know, obviously, this is a podcast about success. We've been talking a lot about your experience as students of color at Brigham Young University, and maybe, you know, those unconscious biases that you've experienced and how people can help. The goal is to turn the minority of people that are trying to be educated and aware, to turn that into the majority at BYU, right? And what strategies would you have for other people, for people out there, the listener, to respond to diversity challenges in team settings?
Okay. Like, there is a diverse person in the group, or there is no diverse person in the group?
Well, that's a good question to ask. Let's say that there is a person of color in the group, and you can't, a lot of people, I feel like when you go out there and into the real world, and when I say real world, I mean you're working, right? You're going to have to have those diverse perspectives. You're going to be working with people that are different than you. Let's portray the scenario that there is a person of a diverse background, whether it be the culture or the race, just different from the majority of the people in the group. How would you, I guess, what advice would you have for people to help to respond to that diversity challenge? And let's look at it from the perspective of the people, the majority of the people.
I think the first thing is, if you hear something or see something, say something. A lot of times I think a person of color can probably feel intimidating by saying something if they see something that's wrong, because they are not in the majority. That's a way that the majority has a privilege. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's like you can use that in a good way and say something. I think it's a lot of pressure to put on the person of color, like, oh, well, they didn't say anything, so it's not wrong. Well, probably they wanted to say something, but they felt really uncomfortable saying something. So that's like my first like baseline like culture. You just have to hold people accountable, especially if you are not the person which could be targeted in this situation.
Thank you. How about from the perspective of the person that is the minority in the group, right? The person that's the minority might feel uncomfortable to speak up and say something, but there's always something that can be done, maybe if it's not within that entire group setting. What would you guys say is a good advice for somebody that finds himself in a situation like that?
Yeah, personally, I would say, find and identify your allies early, because we are constantly walking into white spaces, whether we like it or not, as people of color. But maybe you have to do some research to, have these conversations with other people, kind of feel them out, and then invite them to, hey, can you use your privilege to, speak out on things like this? Like creating allies, if you can, early, so that, you can have people on your side, and then from there you can spread the allyship so that all the weight isn't on you.
Like, I love that. Spread the allyship so all the weight is not on you. Identify those allies early on. There really is power in being an ally. And I'm wondering what you guys feel, how you feel that you're preparing for a successful future, right? We're going to be, like we just mentioned with these previous question, is the fact that we'll have to be working, we'll be exposed to a diverse array of people. And even research says that by year 2050, the United States, it's really going to be even more diverse. The more time goes on, more diversity that there'll be in the workforce, and we'll be more exposed in the future to more diverse perspectives than even right now, the point or the positions that we find ourselves in now. How would you guys say that you're preparing for a successful future as young professionals?
I think for me, like, a big part of it, I mean, of course, everyone's going to say working hard, and that's we're trying to do that. But for me, it's all about this mental space of, like, doubting myself. I think, like, a really big part of, at least, the advertising agency is that, like, confidence is really important. It's basically, like, if you can't sell your idea with confidence, even if like your strategy, you're trying to explain some of the results that you've gotten and where you see the data leading, and like explaining like your brief, so to speak, or like where you feel like something's going. I didn't realize how much confidence plays into doing a good job. And I feel like for me, that's also like a place where I'm not good at. Like, I don't have a lot of confidence in my ideas. And so that to me is more of my success than necessarily where I end up, but just like how am I working myself? Because that's like, I feel like for me, it's 80% of the battle.
Having that self-confidence, believing you can do it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kofi, how about you?
Yeah, I guess for me, I've been trying to establish this within myself is really just staying true to what I value the most and, reminding myself of these like key decisions I'm going to be making or actions I want to take. Like, is this truly me? At the end of the day, I have to live with my own mental health and mental space. And if that's conflicting, I just can't live with that. So I feel like at this point in my life, I'm just kind of ready to move on with different things that I feel like are creating that, cognitive dissonance within me, and really just making those decisions so that I can, relax when I go home at night or, don't have to be constantly living in distress because the decisions I'm making aren't lining up with the values that are important to me.
Really like that a lot. Thank you. I think you guys are going to be doing amazing work out there, especially within advertising, marketing, the portrayal of or representation of more people of diverse backgrounds, people of color especially. And I'm really excited to see what you guys are going to be able to do. Honestly, you guys, we're graduating soon. I know we're all getting close, and I think that. Thank you. I just want to really thank you for taking the time to share these thoughts. People are really going to appreciate it. My last question for you really would be, what last piece of advice could you give for our listener on how they can prepare to be the leaders of tomorrow?
I never realized how important it is to be willing to admit you're wrong. I mean, today we've talked a lot about our experiences around other people socially. And I think if you want to be a leader, if you want to be somebody who can connect more with just their own people, but with everybody, it's really important to be able to admit when you're wrong, and being able to overcome that. I think, this school and the church we are connected to, we preach that we can change. And if we do wrong to someone, that we admit it and we make some sort of reparation. And I think that's really hard to put into practice, but I think that is very much what I look for in a leader these days. I'm not expecting anyone to be perfect, but I do expect people to be able to admit when they're wrong.
More snapping over here. Thank you. Always. How about you, Kofi?
This is one I've been thinking about a lot, is just how much empathy goes so far. And if you can be an empathetic leader and be able to put yourself in the shoes of those you want to lead or of those of your followers or under your stewardship, it changes the whole dynamic and it puts everyone kind of on the same level, even though it may not be that way due to like leadership structures. But being empathetic and being able to resonate with people is how great leaders kind of make changes and make, a difference in the lives of those who they lead. And that's ultimately is what's going to be the most successful at the end of the day, being able to put yourself in the shoes of others.
Thank you, you guys. I have no doubt you guys are going to be great leaders. You'll have to remember me. No, thank you really for sharing all of that. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today, for sharing your perspectives with us about your project and about what you're doing to really leave your mark and to prepare to be that leader of tomorrow, right? To have that successful future. Thanks for listening again, and thank you to Kofi and Evelyn for joining us today. My name's Andrea Cabrera with Measuring Success Right. Have a wonderful week.
Make sure you subscribe to our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. Be a friend and tell a friend about Measuring Success Right.
This podcast is a project of the Marriott Student Review at Brigham Young University. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Marriott Student Review or online at marriottstudentreview.org.